Zurich and Hamburg jazz clubs. Two encounters that made me think about racism. This was a period of my life over about 10 years when in fact I was working in the rather rarefied area of describing and valuing and applying my expertise in a specialized area of Far Eastern collectibles. I traveled quite frequently in Europe and sometimes with a guy from America who was in a similar kind of area to myself. A very, very nice guy. In fact, he made many contributions of original research. He's passed on now, but his work is still used actually, and his research results are used. He spent most of his life, adult life, living in the north of the United States, but he was very obviously a man of the South in terms of his accent, which was very pleasant, but in fact, it was very marked. Excuse me. We got on very well, and I would do the driving, and we had similar venues, businesses we needed to go to, and share expenses and etc. Yeah, it was very, very pleasant, and there we are. Of course, in my case, as soon as the work of the day was done, it was a matter of finding the jazz, sometimes to listen and sometimes just to play. In fact, I became reasonably well known, and he was invited to play sometimes. In fact, gigs. On this particular occasion, we were actually in Zurich, which is a town which I really do like. There were two clubs I used to go to there. One which was called the Casa Bar, which was a kind of mainstreamy blues club. It's gone now, but it was there a long time, and featured quite well-known bands and names. On the other side of the river was something rather different. It was called the Vida Bar. It was essentially a restaurant, but the owner, in fact, was a great jazz fanatic, and he only featured, absolutely top-line people. We're not talking about semi-pros. He featured international names. There was never a huge audience, but it was a kind of the guy who owned the place. He loved the music and presumably had the money to be able to do it. So there we are. On this particular evening, with my friend, let's call him Jake, we went over to the Vida Bar. He wasn't really a jazz fan particularly, but he came along and with me. An amazing band was performing, led by Thad Jones. The band was full of really top-line, top-draw musicians. There couldn't have been any more than probably, 30, 35 people in the audience, a very sort of nice ambience. And it was excellent. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I'm not quite sure about Jake, but I certainly enjoyed it. Anyway, after the gig, because it was such an intimate atmosphere, and what was essentially a restaurant during the day, the band all sort of ended up sitting along the bar. And I wandered over and got talking to the pianist, and we were having a very good conversation, and I got smiles off the band, and including Thad Jones, and I was basking in the reflected glory, as it were. The interesting thing was that Jake made no attempt whatsoever to actually come from his far corner in the restaurant to come over and join us. And I didn't really think about it particularly at the time. I thought, well, maybe, this is just, he's not particularly interested in the music and probably feels that he's not wants to hear much conversation or want to contribute to the conversation. It was only later that I realised, well, perhaps I'm wrong, but I don't think so, that the fact was this band were all African Americans, and Jake's upbringing, presumably as a child, had inculcated that this was undesirable and to be avoided. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I think that's it. Children are actually the adults are not very often, but a large part of their personalities, in fact, are forged during childhood, and knowing the kind of politics and the general social mores of south of the USA, and particularly at that time, it isn't really surprising. The interesting follow-on from this is we then drove up to Hamburg, where we also had work to do, and eventually ended up in Dennis's Swing Club, also gone, but was a famous club, and it also featured from time to time really very well-known names. It was a legendary club. On this particular evening, there was an African-American youngish woman, in fact, who I discovered worked out of Switzerland, and she did the European clubs. And I knew the rhythm section because I'd been there before, and in fact was invited to play with the band, which I did. And after the gig, we were chatting to this singer. I can't remember her name. I do have a photograph actually of the evening. The interesting thing was, in stark contrast to Jake's attitude in the bar in Zurich, in this particular instance, he shot over to where I was talking to this lady, and he was trying very, very hard indeed to ingratiate himself with her and impress her. A real contrast to the way he behaved in Zurich. And read into this what you will, but the fact is we are to some extent victims of the attitudes we are taught as children, and it's inescapable. You can modify your behavior. I'm sure people do. But for many people, it's a kind of conditioned reflex, and it's sad in a way, the way, in fact, people's attitudes are shaped by generations of prejudice. If you've enjoyed this video and would like to see more, please subscribe.